All right, welcome on in everyone to another episode of First CSP, the channel dedicated to bringing you the first council shoulder patch issued from each council in Scouting America, both past and present. Today we're going to take a look at Long Beach Area 32 out of California. This council was originally chartered in 1919. Head on over to the patch table, a couple patches to take a look at today, starting with the first issue TA1, listed in the collecting guide, with its gold border, blue background, red letters, ship, airplane, and oil derrick. This is from 1960 and was produced for the National Jamboree, so it is a pre-CSP. It's not one that you find as frequently, although a couple have come up for auction more recently, but generally you go long time spans between seeing one of these up and available. Almost all of them I've ever seen, which is two outside of this, have been sewn. I've seen one that was ever not sewn. So this was stitched along the edges, but still in pretty decent condition for a 1960 patch. And this is the TA1. And as is the case with all of our previous collecting, where we have an activity issue as the first issue or a pre-CSP as the first issue, in this case both are true, we also try and collect the first regular post-1970 CSP, so we've got those here as well. Now, Long Beach is a very large council, and so they had a number of production runs for their CSPs. This was originally divided into two variants, the T2A and T2B. The only difference in those is the background for one is listed as pale blue, that was the T2A, and the background listed as light blue for the T2B. We're finding that the variations in those colors is very slight. So we're going to present what we have and what we believe to be T2As and Bs, but we'll certainly let all of you provide additional feedback should you find that you believe you've found something different for the council. So we've got two examples here of what I believe to be T2As. These are the pale blue backgrounds. All of them are going to highlight the Queen Elizabeth, which is there ported in Long Beach and a staple of the area. Its final voyage landing there off the coast of California and then being, I think, purchased by the city to be run as an attraction, still there today. So we've got a couple of these. These have what appear to be kind of a smoother twill for the background. They do appear slightly lighter than the T2Bs, which I'll show in a moment for comparison. I do think you can see kind of the cuts on these are a little bit different. So I do think that these are different production runs of the T2A. You can kind of see slight differences in the font as well. One of the highlights for these, it's hard to get the labels to stick. One of the defining characteristics is the lock stitching on these is going to be yellow. You can see we've got one has kind of a plastic coating and one is a cloth back on these T2As. Both of these using that yellow lock stitching. I think that is one of the defining characteristics of the T2As. We're going to see that they then move to clear lock stitching for the T2Bs, and then the subsequent T3s, which we have an example of, also use clear lock stitching. So that seems to be the trend, and one of the guiding points that I'm using to try and differentiate between T2As and Bs. Again, if you have more detailed information on these Long Beaches, please feel free to drop it in the comments, or if you want to send us a photo, in the description below every video there's always the email link or our X account, which you could send us information or photos on. I'm going to leave up one of these T2As and put up a T2B below it. So we are believing that this is the pale blue, which usually is always a lighter color when comparing the terms pale blue and light blue in the collecting guides. And then we have a more defined twill. So we have a stronger grain in the twill for these. We believe these to then be the light blues. That color also does appear to match what comes later with the T3s, and all the T3s were listed as light blues as well. You can see on the back for these T2Bs that they've now moved to clear lock stitching along the border. So that gives us a bit of a difference there. But there's kind of the side-by-side comparison. It is very slight. We get a much smoother twill here, which appears, because I think it's a smoother twill, to be a bit lighter. That's your pale blue T2A, which would be technically the first regular. And then you get the stronger grain twill here. And this appears to be slightly darker, which they're calling light blue. We have a couple of these T2Bs as well, because again, there was multiple production runs. You can see slight differences in the fonts here. So we get kind of a bolder font here, a thinner font on the second. Slight differences in the lengths as well. Flip both of these over. Both of these are just cloth back. And use that clear lock stitching. So I do believe that to be a signifying characteristic of T2Bs. Again, if you happen to have more information, please feel free to share it with us. I have gone back and forth over many Long Beach T2s to try and decipher if we have both the A and B, looking at images online, talking with other collectors via email and in some groups to try and bring you as much information as possible. And then we'll go ahead and we'll throw up one of the T3s. The T3 was divided into, formally divided into 3 variants, A, B, and C. These are all defined by adding the fleur-de-lis. So this is also listed as light blue, all of the T3s. This is a T3A, but all of the T3s are listed as light blue, which would match the T2B. So this also seems to be a bit closer than what we were seeing on the A's. So here's our T2A for comparison. So this is pale, and we're calling these light on the blues. Here's the back of this one. Happens to have like the felt back for this T3. Also using that clear lock stitching. So it seemed to be that they progressed from yellow lock stitching in the early issues to clear lock stitching in the later issues. That does seem to be somewhat consistent. But again, if you have additional information, we're certainly happy to kind of collect as much for all the interested parties, collectors, those just casually wanting to know what these first issues were. But that gives you kind of a rundown of what we believe are the first issues for Long Beach. Started off obviously with the lesser seen TA1, and then we have the regular issues T2AB, and here happens to be a T3A. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. Again, would love to hear your feedback in the comments. Doing our best to try and I've held off on creating this video until I've gone back and forth with enough collectors to make myself feel comfortable that we have the T2A and T2B information to be able to provide to you. Again, if you look at more recent collecting guides, that's all just going to be listed as T2. They've stripped away those variations. They're just all calling T2s now. So that is where it stands with Long Beach and the early issues. We'll be back again tomorrow with another brand new episode of First CSP. We hope to see you back here for that. But until then, hope you guys have a great rest of your day.